Hello, this is my comprehensive Rec Room sword fighting guide for newer players looking to get better at this game. I hope to cover many of the mechanics and skills I've learned during my time playing for fun and in competition. Thank you for watching, and I hope you can learn a thing or two. Going off the assumption that you, the player, has at least picked up a sword before, considering you're watching this video, we're not going to talk about just flailing it around, because that's not really a skill. The first thing you're going to need to learn is how to drag hit, which is probably the most basic hitting strategy beyond just, flailing wildly and expecting something to happen. The first thing we're going to be talking about is drag hitting, which is summarized. You may have thought it was more complicated. It's basically the action of moving forward and back as you hit to extend the range of your sword. Forward into a hit and backing up as the hit reaches its climax. Like that. So a simple move forward as you're hitting, and when you hit about the middle of the hit, back up. The point of this, because it's not pointless, is that when you're moving forward or standing still, the length of your hit is far shorter than when you're moving backwards. So you could be saying, then why don't I just move backwards as I hit? Well, the forward part is so you get ahead of your current position, so by the time you back up, you're in the same position. Your hit is lengthened compared to if you just stood still from that position. It also acts as a bait for enemies who are getting overconfident in their skills, that when you move forward, they may try to attack you, and then you back up into the hit. The way you're going to want to train this type of hit is generally just to practice, right? You got to practice the motion of moving back and forth. For everybody, depending on arm length, it's going to work slightly differently. And the amount of length you get is seemingly dependent on your amount you walk backward, your backward speed, and generally just how the game caps it. We're going to learn about this later on, but basically, if I slide backwards, you see how the drag goes even farther than if I don't. You see, that's because I'm moving faster backwards, right? From here on out, before you move to the next parts of the tutorial, you're probably going to want to work on your drag hitting. Dragging basically acts as the pillar to the rest of the game, as a gate kind of. Once you learn to drag, you can incorporate different types of actions into that drag. But at the end of the day, many of your hits are still going to be drags where you walk back and forth. There's not a lot of hitting strategies where you're moving forward the whole time. And a lot of them generally don't work very well or are very situational. The next fundamental of sword fighting that many newer players seem to misunderstand is the blocking mechanic in Rec Room. Basically, the sword does not act as the actual weapon. With the sword comes a white line behind it. The sword is not what actually kills, but the white line behind it. The harder you hit, the less faint the white line will be and the longer it'll last. But the less hard you hit, the fainter it'll be. So, as in dragging, you're kind of trying to lead the enemy into the white line behind your sword. This ties into blocking. Let's say I'm blocking like that, just on my side, and the enemy sword is coming in. Their sword hits my sword, right? The white line behind it will be created null. And this is sometimes iffy whether this works or not. But that does not count per se for if I hit that way then hit back. I'm not sure about the exact timing behind how long blocks last, blah 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 blah. But you'll get the feel for it. Basically, you just gotta block their sword before it hits your body, or else their white line will kill you. But if they hit and you walk into their white line, right, you can't block their white line. You have to block the sword before their white line begins. A lot of the times you can just block with your wrist. You don't have to really put your full arm into it. There's a lot of different blocking angles. So let's say a sword's coming to your side. You can either just block like this with your hand upright and the sword upright, or like that, right? And from what I know, the handle does block, but the basic blocks for when people are hitting you from the side with drags are going to be stuff like this or this, where it blocks your side. Because if you're blocking out front, the sword may go around and hit you in your side, and if your sword doesn't make contact with their sword before it hits your body, then they're gonna hit you. Let's say I do that, I can also combo that into a top hit or a side hit. Depending on the angle that their sword tip is hitting, you'll need to block farther back on your head, in front of your head. And then there's also the basic blocking, where you bring the sword out in front of your body, like that. So if they do try to hit you, they'll hit the tip of your sword before they make it to you if they're trying to drag. But with stuff like that, like we'll learn soon, there's stuff like flicks and other stuff that you can use to counter that pretty easily. If their sword is coming at me, as I'm moving forward, I can block and then back up into a hit. That's kind of how you do a basic counterattack with the block. If your opponent's being super aggressive and you need to be defensive, you're going to want to learn how to block. There's also things like God block, or general lag and stuff that some players have that makes their blocks practically invincible. I'm not going to name any names, but some players do that. It is a little gay. Some players are better than others. At the end of the day, it's less about blocking and more about just dragging ability and ability to dodge hits, because blocking especially can be very, fidgety sometimes and doesn't work all the time. So just add that to your skill resume, but don't rely on it, because it's not going to help you 100% of the time, especially with people with more defensive play styles. You're going to need to learn how to play offensive and defensive. Alright, under the impression that you've watched both of the last sections, or at least know the basics of dragging and blocking, we're going to move on to something a little more advanced, but something pretty basic generally that you'll need to know if you want to sword fight. This is about dodging. A lot of it comes down to movement. Dragging is probably the easiest way to just dodge, because it's part of the drag is dodging, just backing up as you hit, which a lot of people use to dodge, but there's also other ways beyond that. Things like when you're moving into a hit, ducking down. I don't know how people, I don't know if it's just short people, but some people can get their body all the way under the damn ground and then pop back up for a hit, because you can come in and then drag back out, that dodges any attempts to hit down or over. If you're trying to hit at normal level and somebody comes in ducking and hitting, there's other ways to do it. Just head bobbing using your waist and things. Basically, you'll just want to dodge the white line. Like, let's say you're running into a drag and somebody slashes and there's a white line right behind you. You got to be ready to back up. Or if somebody is hitting high, you can try and duck under it. Usually you can combo with the blocks too to try and dodge and block. Let's say somebody's hitting down, you can try and sidestep it and go in for the hit. You can incorporate dodges into a lot of counters and such. You can dodge into hits too. Like, let's say we're going to learn about these later, flick, where I'm just doing a quick flick with my wrist. I can dodge into the flick or back out of it. You're going to find yourself unconsciously doing dodges a lot of the time, just because it's, basic human function. When something's flying at your face, your body's first instinct is going to be to dodge it. Just make sure to set good room boundaries so you don't smash your face into a wall like I've done many times. Yeah, those are basically the basics, but here's a little fancy hobo trick not many people know. Is probably going to be one of the most important things in the tutorial, because it's a big part of my sword fighting style. You can actually use sliding to gain directional speed and dodge more easy. Let's say, for example, I'm going in for a hit. Dodging back allows you to move faster in a shorter amount of time than just normal, back and forth. It can also be used to lengthen drags and sidestep like that. Sliding, you can even use it in midair. It's kind of hard with the Rift S controllers. I'm used to doing it on Quest. There's a way where you can click A and the slide button at the same time to gain extra momentum and maneuverability in midair like that. Like here, I can jump straight, but I can also, if you get it right, you can feel it. What you're gonna have to do is walk forward, and right as you bring the stick back, bring your click down on the slide joystick. You can get it more better. It just takes a lot of practice. Took a lot of time for me to do it because I kind of found it on accident. You can do different things with it, like you can CS:GO bunny hop, kind of, just by jumping into a slide and then doing it again. You gain a shit ton of speed. You can jump, slide backwards super fast too. which is what I do to get around maps fast and shit. You can also click slide a second time to slide cancel, which allows you to do things like drags where you are sliding back and then suddenly stop and go in for a frontward slide. So like I slide back and then I slide the other direction. Yeah, advanced dodging tutorial. Heck yeah, Yahoo. God, this is gonna be a pain in the ass to edit. I keep rambling. Starting off with one of the most commonly used hitting techniques, the flick, which can be summarized as a short, fast hit where you use your wrist and are just trying to kind of poke at the enemy in a sense. Kind of like that, as compared to like a long, drawn out hit. You're kind of just doing a quick flick of the wrist. Starting off with possibly the most versatile type of flick, we're going to start off with the drag side flick, as I like to call it. Could be called something else, but that's what I call it. So I'm going to jump into POV and show you what it looks like in a first-person view. Okay, so once you got the sword in your hand, the side flick's about as easy as just a quick movement of the wrist and elbow in conjunction, back and forth to do a quick little hit to the side and back. It's really as easy as that. As compared to a slow, kind of more revolving drag, the drag side flick is just you go in with the first part and back up with the second part, like that. That allows you to get the climax of your hit at the longest point, so when you come back, the hit is as far as possible. It really allows for a lot more speedy hits than just if you were to just drag back and forth slowly. So that's probably the most basic flick. But there's a lot you can do with the angles and such. Another common flick attack used by players, the diagonal flick. You just lean into it, do it diagonally upwards, and then kind of back up with your drag. So like that. At least that's how I do it. You step in, and then you back up. And you can do that in a quick little kind of motion. You don't even have to step into it if you don't want. It's just an unpredictable attack because you can have your hand down to your side and do it. And it also won't collide with the ground as much as if you're going to do a complete downward flick. Because look, if I try to do a complete downward flick, it gets stuck in the ground sometimes. But if I do it from my side diagonally, I can do it up. It doesn't collide as much with the ground, and it still is unpredictable. This can also be done from the top. Just flick from your opposite side over your shoulder downwards. A lot of players do this. I'm not sure exactly how the hitboxes on it work, but I have seen players who jump into and flick, and it seems to work. This could technically be comboed with my weird slide jump thing to create kind of although I wouldn't recommend jumping a ton, because jumping actually stretches out your hitbox, making it easier for you to hit, and it's harder to back up in midair because you keep your momentum. So if you try to jump forward and then come back, it'll stall you in midair instead of actually bringing you backwards. Just something to keep in mind. And last of the flicks is the vertical flick, as I dubbed it, which basically includes both the downward flick and the upward flick, which are very important to learn because basically it can allow you, if the opponent's not ready, to reach over their guard or reach under their guard, hitting them in either the, waist, since Rec Room characters don't really have feet, or in the back of the noggin. You can lean into it too if you're looking to do something that's a bit harder to hit, something like what some people do where they lean down into it and then upwards, but be ready because sometimes it can collide with the ground and cause the sword to glitch out, especially if you're trying to do it really fast. The basics are you just want to bring it kind of behind you or under you at the least and just flick up, or you bring it above your head and just flick down. It's pretty similar to the other two flicks. You can drag with it if you want, or you can just move forward with it. It all depends on how you want to use it at the end of the day. You can also feint a flick where you flick. You can do this with any of them technically, but you can flick and then bring it into a normal hit. So they think you're going to flick. You can flick a bunch and then do a normal hit. You can also flick and then bring it back. You can do a flick and then a backwards flick. Because if, let's say, they block the attack on that side, you can bring it back to the other side and it makes it hard to hit. Or you can flick here and then bring it under in like a rotation motion behind you. You can combo flicks into things like spins. Like if I flick and then flick, come back and go for the spin, or just flick, stutter, go back. You know, you can do stuff like that. They're probably, I'd say, the most versatile of hits, beyond obviously just dragging, because you drag basically whenever you hit. Now we will be covering the most dangerous type of hit, I'd say, especially for a new player, is most likely the spin. But once you do learn how to spin properly, it can be one of the most helpful, hard to predict hits you can do, and generally be the most cool and most badass, you could say. It's what a lot of, better players use. They utilize spins a lot, even to the point where I guess it could be considered spamming, but it's all about how you think about it, I guess. The main thing you're going to want to learn for spins is spin range, spin speed, and understanding what the enemy is going to do, so you don't run into their hit or get hit in the back, because if you spin too slow, you're just going to get your shit slapped out of you. But if your spin isn't long enough, they can just dodge it, and then while your fucking back is turned to them, they'll just hit you in the back. So it's hard to master, but you are going to want to learn it if you want to become a good player. When it comes to spinning, I've learned, or at least I think in my opinion, that the most important part of the spin, and the thing you want to focus on the most, is speed. Because like I said earlier, let's say you're flicking. If you can get a really fast spin that catches the opponent off guard, it can be practically impossible to block or dodge at that point. Basically, I'd say the best way to spin, and the fastest way, is to position sideways, put your body sideways to the opponent, and look over the shoulder you're not holding your sword in, putting your hand with your sword towards the opponent still. This will give the enemy the illusion that you're just standing looking straight towards them, but in reality, you're already halfway through your spin. As compared to an opponent who will have to do a full 360 spin, you're already in a position where you basically only have to do a 180 spin. And that combined with just using your joystick and turning your head, you're basically done with your spin in less than a second probably. So you can just combo this with a hard hitting hand, put your elbow into it, and you can get your spin done pretty fast. And you can even put your hand behind you if you want to give the illusion that your spin's even faster than it actually is. And that'll psych out the opponent, think you have a super fast spin, and then you can just do an easy, slow spin. And what I'd recommend for general spinning is that you walk into the spin, bringing your joystick forward, and then when you begin to turn, you bring it back. So you're dragging during your whole spin, and you walk towards the opponent, and then you spin back, right? And this can be combined with other things like sliding. You can slide to gain more momentum, or a faster spin, There's a lot you can do with spins, really. You can do an upward spin over your head. You can do things like bait and then spin. So drags also apply to spins, but you just have to hit pretty hard. Put your elbow into it. Summarized, if you want the fastest spin, basically keep your headset towards the opponent, but turn your whole body against the opponent so that you can use your knee and your foot to kind of propel yourself the other direction than just use your stick. And especially if you're on quest, you can spin in both real life and with your stick, but I usually never spin fully in real life and with my stick. Just use spin with half your body and then also with your stick, and you should be good. Just face your whole body other than your headset away from your opponent. Get ready, and when they're coming at you, bait them in and give them the old Kanye double-double. Easy as that. The next thing we're going to learn about is baits and counters. So a counter, for example, would be I block and then I hit into the block. And I'd say a bait and a switch is when you kind of, the way you play guides an opponent into, I'll just call it the kill zone, and then you kill them. So something like this, where I walk forward, right? I'm coming forward, so they're like, oh shit, this is my time to strike, and my sword's over here, and they come in, and then I bring the sword back. So that's kind of a bait, where I bait them in with my actions, and then I'm ready to go back. So I'm going to go over a few of them. I guess we'll see if they work for you. So on and so forth. I'm going to call this bait. This is probably the one I used to use the most. And you should probably learn how to spin before doing this one. Basically, you spin the opposite way that you're comfortable spinning. You put your hand behind your back, you spin back, so you're blocking your back, right? Oh, my sword glitched out. I have bad tracking, but you see what I'm saying? You turn back, you look back while your sword's like that, and then you bring it back, keeping it behind you and bringing it back the opposite way. That baits the enemy into thinking, oh shit, his back's turned, he's not going to be able to hit me, and then you hit the opposite direction, which they're most likely not expecting. So it's like that, and I turn with my sword behind me, and then bring it back around, and you drag with that too, so it's like, bring it, bah, bring it, bah, move into the enemy with it, bring it back, bah. Another solid one that you can use is, as I was going earlier, the drag and opposite drag. Bring him in, moving forward. Get that out of my face. You bring in, moving forward, and then you back up. There's some more stuff you can do with it. Bait him in with a flick and then bring it into a full hit. You can bait him in with a flick and then spin. Basically, your probably best thing for baiting is going to be fast hits like flicks. Another thing you can do with that, here, I'm going to move the camera because this fucking sword keeps getting in my way. Another thing you can do with that is sliding. You can bait in and then back up with the slide. If you bait in and then back up with the slide, because you're moving backwards so fast, you can go in with the hit and then back out with the slide or sidestep, like that. Or go in and then sidestep, go in, back, go in, back. It's kind of like a flick that baits them in, and then I back up super fast so it's hard for them to hit me because I'm dodging back so fast. But they're already caught in my trap so I can hit them. Especially if they're an aggressive player who's moving towards me really fast. That allows me to get a good hit on them without being in their range. If somebody's coming at me, I can do the sliding jump thing to go around them, or just a general jump where you kind of circle around them aiming downwards. You can do it with flicks, right? There's a lot you can do. The basics of it are you just want to bait your enemy into the climax of your drag and then bring it back. Thank you for watching the video. I hope I taught you something, whether you're new or getting back into the game or anything. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments or whatever. I hope I answered some of your questions. Before the video ends, I'm going to show me in a public game. I'm a little rusty. Haven't played in a while. I don't really play much anymore, but I thought I would try and help out some of the new players. So I'm going to show off some of the skills that hopefully you learned here being used in real games, and I'll probably caption or annotate it what skill I'm using, or like what thing I'm using as I'm using it, so I can kind of demonstrate. Okay? Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Cue the montage for a few minutes. Yay. Thank you for watching my video. Yahoo. Signing off.